Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 23rd, 2020, and today we're going to be discussing Bernie Sanders moving on up the Democratic ladder. Now, recently I just made a video discussing whether or not Bernie Sanders was the most electable 2020 Democrat, besides the overall conclusion of the video, Bernie Sanders has since done pretty well in statewide polling and national polling. Now I get it. Why am I all of a sudden just deciding to cover a video about this and what could be a 3 to 4 day streak of momentum? But the Iowa caucus is coming up in exactly 10 days, and if he leads into this with this type of momentum and he brings it over into New Hampshire right after, it could put Bernie Sanders on the pathway to the nomination very quickly. Yes, Joe Biden has been resilient and has led this entire campaign season, except for that one blip where Elizabeth Warren overcame him. But at the same time, well, we see Bernie Sanders, who is now in second place nationwide and has been for quite a while, actually starting to inch up a little bit more, but every percentage matters when the election is getting this close. Now, if you take a look at some of the more recent polls, there's one that actually comes out pretty surprising. Let's take a look at this sidebar here. All you pretty much see is Biden, with the exception of a possible Warren victory, a possible Warren lead in some of the polls. But if you keep looking, it's just Biden. Now, all of a sudden, we've been introduced where Bernie Sanders has actually led in a CNN poll, and Biden's numbers have dropped dramatically since the beginning of the CNN polling early or late 2019. So if we take a look at the national average, Bernie Sanders, you can see, is on an increase. So is Joe Biden, but not by the same amount, and he's pretty much leveling off to where he's been. If you take a look at the max, it typically went this way, dip back up, dip back up, dip back up for Biden. But Warren did overcome Bernie Sanders for a pretty long period of time, and Bernie Sanders is back on top of Elizabeth Warren, and now he's at 23% nationwide, and Joe Biden is at 29%. A 6-point lead is not comfortable when you're already going into a race that you could possibly lose, and that polls already underestimated this candidate before. The whole thing that happened with Elizabeth Warren definitely did hurt Bernie Sanders' campaign for a small time being, but now Bernie Sanders has started to move attention away from that and attack Joe Biden as a candidate rather than feud off with someone who has very similar interests and very similar ideals as himself. So it really makes sense as to why he's moved on to Joe Biden, but Elizabeth Warren isn't doing too well either. But we need to make sure that we're not over, hyping up Bernie Sanders. Yes, he has momentum right now. If it does continue, he could likely be the nominee. But there are some worries from people like President Barack Obama, who is labeled as a centrist Democrat. Even though he is argued to be a progressive because he did push for change, he definitely did not hold the same values that Bernie Sanders holds now, and he did not win on those values. There may be some crossover, but Obama, at the end of the day, is a centrist Democrat, a lot like Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. And they are rightfully afraid of Bernie Sanders. There has really never been a Democratic contender in recent political history that has actually fought for something, very different than what we might expect. Bernie Sanders really does want to make sure that his campaign is focused on rebuilding a system that is broken and working for the general people. I'm not saying that's a bad goal, but the two types of Democrats have way different approaches. The moderate Democrats definitely want to work with Republicans on things, not saying the progressives don't, but pretty much focus on middle ground policies, not too far to the left, not too much big government. But for the progressive Democrats, they go all out, and they win on that in a number of districts and a number of races, whether it's a governor race or a Senate race or a House race. And we could likely see Bernie Sanders win the presidential race. Bernie Sanders brings a lot of new ideas to the table that, frankly, I think both the Republican and centrist Democratic Party are afraid of. And again, rightfully so. This is something brand new that they haven't really seen in a general election candidate in a really long time. And I think that they're worried that they can't win with this candidate. Obama said that he does not believe, according to his close advisors, he does not believe that Bernie Sanders can win the nomination, can win the presidential election against Donald Trump. Now, whether or not that's true, which I do not personally think is true, if you've seen my videos discussing that, but Bernie Sanders, I would not say is the strongest Democrat, but I do think it's possible for him to win. a lot of these Democrats are focusing attention away from Bernie Sanders and putting it maybe not on Joe Biden, but maybe on people like Elizabeth Warren, who, frankly, I really don't understand why a lot of Democrats are so willing to get behind Elizabeth Warren in terms of the Hillary Clinton Democrats. Compared to Bernie Sanders, they practically stand for the same thing. Yes, there is the whole Bernie Sanders ran in 2016 and could have messed up Hillary Clinton. But besides that point, a lot of these Democrats are going to have to rally behind whichever nominee it is. But it's just surprising to me that they would be super fine with supporting Elizabeth Warren, but not so much Bernie Sanders. They really stand the same on almost, a lot of the key issues. Obviously not all of them, but Joe Biden definitely seems like the more center candidate in Iowa. He's currently leading there, but very, very narrowly. I mean, we could see Bernie Sanders win in Iowa, win in New Hampshire, and then Biden would have to cut off that momentum at South Carolina, possibly Nevada. I mean, if there's enough momentum, Sanders will win Nevada. And then when Super Tuesday hits, I think that it should all level out and probably be a very even playing field for both Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, and the rest of the candidates will drop out as we move throughout the campaign season. But Bernie Sanders, I mean, this is a guy that ran in 2016 against practically someone that was adored within the Democratic Party prior to Donald Trump and other Republicans entering into the race around that time period where they actually started attacking her. And he took her down from 60-70% at one point, all the way down to getting very, very close to her at the national election. He had that election. It was not too much in his favor, to be completely honest. Also, the times weren't exactly with him. It looks like in 2020, the Democrats may be ready to nominate someone like Bernie Sanders after just losing with a candidate that parallels to someone like Joe Biden. But Joe Biden also has that Obama appeal, and Obama did win 2 terms, which is why a lot of Democrats, I do believe, think that Joe Biden is the most electable candidate. Objectively, he is. And if you're taking a look at the cold, hard data, which you can't argue with numbers, yes, quote unquote, the polls were wrong in 2016. They weren't. But I guess since they were supposedly wrong, all of a sudden polling is invalidated. Well, I mean, you can't say that you believe some polls and then don't trust others. I have that issue with President Trump in the aspect that he does show certain polls that are favorable to him and then does not choose the ones that are not favorable to him. Obviously, that's the spin factor, and that's just the way that politics goes. But at the same time, if you're denouncing CNN for one thing and then taking the CNN poll and then using it for something else, it looks a little weird. I've seen a lot of Democrats do that, whether they're on the Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders side. But Bernie Sanders, I mean, like I said, he's going to hit New Hampshire and he's going to win it. The most recent poll from the state of New Hampshire shows him with a 12-point lead. Joe Biden actually led here for a little bit. I was actually surprised that he had a 15-point lead. I think that was just a couple polls that were skewed off. But it definitely went back and forth. I mean, it went Biden, Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, Sanders, Biden, Sanders. It's pretty weird, pretty interesting. That's just how New Hampshire goes. If you remember, Hillary Clinton led there in 2016, not of the election. Bernie Sanders definitely was expected to win it, but a couple months before. So things definitely change. But we are 10 days away from the Iowa caucus. I am so excited. I am so excited. We are finally hitting the actual campaign season. Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and South Carolina will be the first 4 tests for these 2020 Dems. Someone notable I don't exactly see gaining a lot of traction early on is Elizabeth Warren. She's a strong candidate. She can do well in Iowa. Not seeing it in New Hampshire, Nevada, or South Carolina, but it's possible. Buttigieg, however, I do see doing very well in Iowa and New Hampshire, so we should also make sure to take a look at that once we actually hit it on February 3rd. Again, these states, if you don't know how the primary process works or need a little bit clarification, they are not weighted the most. The reason why we put such an emphasis on these early 4 states is mainly because they will be the first telling signs of how the American electorate will vote in this general Democratic primary. But it is possible for things to change midway through. The Iowa results may not agree with the nominee, even though I think it has in the past 2 elections, Obama and Clinton, yes. But again, that's only the last 2. It's not exactly that there's a historical precedent there. But Nevada, like I said, narrow Biden lead, then Sanders, then Warren, then Buttigieg. And then South Carolina, we have Biden with a very large lead. I mean, if he loses that, he's going to lose the nomination because he's losing in other areas. But I don't expect him to not do too well in South Carolina. But Bernie Sanders, definitely something to watch out for a lot of centrist Democrats. A lot of them are trying to push him away, push his agenda away from the Democratic convention. When you get to the general election, you definitely need to move closer to the center because you need to win independents at this point. It's not just a Democratic primary. But I don't think Bernie Sanders will do that, and I think that's exactly why the Democratic Party is afraid. I'm talking fast. Bernie Sanders is a Democrat that brings about change that maybe not all of the Democrats agree with, but that's up for the American electorate to decide whether or not it's needed now or later. So that pretty much covers this video. I will be trying to make my election night video for the Democratic primary, like I said before Iowa. It does take a lot because I do need to figure out percentages for each of the candidates, delegates, and then figure out the superdelegate tally because, like I said in my previous video, it's going to be a contested convention. It's going to be really hard for any of these Democrats to actually win outright, but that should be coming up soon, probably not tomorrow, but when I have a lot of time to work on it. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.